Are the Saints moving on from Mike McCarthy, Mickey Loomis setting sights on the NFL's top assistant? This is Off the Bench. Jacob Hester, T-Bob, live from the Senior Bowl in Mobile. I've been to the Senior Bowl quite a few times, and it's always a good time. Haven't been in a while since it kind of lost its luster. I remember at one point the Senior Bowl was like the college all-star game, but now very rarely the top prospects play, and so I haven't been back in a while. But if you ever get a chance to go to the Senior Bowl, it is a lot of fun. But today we're talking about Mickey Loomis, Mike McCarthy, this Josina Anderson tweet that has everybody asking me what's going on. So we'll talk about all of that in this video. Let's let T-Bob and Jacob set the foundation, set the plate for me to react.
The news cycle continues to spin right along. First and foremost, Jake, it appears that the Saints brass is, quote, not enamored with Mike McCarthy. So, although the resume is
probably because he asked questions.
I mean, look, I don't know if I know anything about McCarthy on a personal level beyond what Matt just said. He liked him quite a bit.
Right.
I don't know if it's look, I can't speak to the how or the why, but and it makes sense given that there's not an offer or anything. Word on the street is Saints brass unenamored with Mike McCarthy. And remember, yesterday they fly out to Philadelphia to go meet with Kellen Moore, and Kellen Moore feels like, I think certainly from the Saints' perspective, he is the leader in the clubhouse, or at least believe that. We haven't gotten any reports that the interviews went poorly or anything like that.
So Vegas right now has moved. Remember yesterday we were talking about it. Kellen Moore's actually moved up to the top choice at plus 300.
What that tells you is it's Moore's job. Like, if Moore wants it, he can have it, which we knew, that's no surprise here. It's the whole question with Kellen Moore is, does he want to become the head coach? Does he want to be a head coach? Like we said last week, the Saints are in a good situation that they're the only job available. So Kellen Moore has a real decision here where his stock is pretty damn high. So now he's got to decide, do I want to be a head coach? Do I want to stay in this offensive coordinator carousel? He's been there for a while. He's seen how this worked. He got fired from Dallas. He got fired from the Chargers, sort of kind of didn't get fired in both, but got fired in both. And now he's at Philly. So he's done this. He has seen how this operates. He knows now, all right, look, I'm on a Super Bowl, could be a Super Bowl winning staff. This might be the time to go. And if he wants to do that, if he wants to prove himself and stick it to Mike McCarthy, this is the time to do it. And so he's probably weighing that. He's probably weighing that decision quite heavily. Now, as far as McCarthy, I think it's the funniest thing in the world where all this Mike McCarthy news, we've been talking about this for weeks with Mike McCarthy and the Saints. Mike McCarthy is the favorite. Mike McCarthy is the choice. Mike McCarthy was here in 2000. Mike McCarthy is the front office's favorite guy in the world. Mike McCarthy. And then it's neither side has talked to each other. Mike McCarthy and the Saints haven't interviewed. They haven't talked. They haven't done anything. And so now it's Mike McCarthy's demanding this, this, and this. It's when? Is he just is he writing it in his diary? How is he making these demands when he hasn't even had an interview yet? He hasn't even... so it's crazy. The Saints are flying to Philadelphia to interview with Kellen Moore in person. Meanwhile, Mike McCarthy's yelling out of his window, I want roster control. I think Mickey Loomis should step down. It's who is he even talking to? He's just screaming into the void.
Mike McCarthy plus 350. Kafka is plus 450. Then Anthony Weaver, the Dolphins defensive coordinator, plus 600. And so it does feel like Kellen Moore's probably the leader. Kellen Moore was the coordinator for the Chargers last year. There was a lot I liked about him. He's at least got offenses that...
Yeah, he got Brandon Staley. Now, another important thing to remember, we covered this in a video earlier, was the packages, all right? Pause. Who's going to go with who? Jacob mentions the Chargers. Kellen Moore could bring Brandon Staley in as his DC, all right? So that's an interesting little wrinkle.
Are towards the top of the league.
Yeah.
I've seen him with stars. I've seen him with an injury riddled team where he still had some
Yeah.
success. And is it my top choice? No. But I think if you get Kellen Moore, that would be much more exciting than some of the other names that we've thrown around here. Look, Mike McCarthy is a safe choice, and so I think that's a lot of us thought maybe they would go safe because this might be Mickey Loomis's last time to hire a head coach. But of the people that are rumored and Vegas says have odds, I think Kellen Moore might be the best of those choices.
Yeah, look, I think the things that I like about Moore are
he's a lefty. You love that.
It's true. I forgot about that. I like that he was 50-3 as a start. No, he wasn't.
He
It
was a
crazy.
dog.
50-3 as a start.
Yeah, he was the man at Boise State. I saw a stat where if Kellen Moore is hired, it'll be the first time that a head coach and their starting quarterback played against each other in college. Boise State and Kellen Moore played Fresno State and Derek Carr, and Kellen Moore got the best of them that day. And Boise State did. But let me go back to the safe option. I don't know if Mike McCarthy is the safest option anymore. Like Mike McCarthy, you could argue he's the safest option between like him and Joe Brady because Joe Brady is such an unknown. But between him and Kellen Moore, like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I guess it's a safe option as far as like one guy has just done the operational side of head coaching, but him and Rizzi are kind of like the same as far as like safe, as far as like a guy who he can do the infrastructure side of things, but as far as like a ceiling and a floor, I don't know if he is the safe choice anymore because to me, he comes with like a real, I don't want to say a PR nightmare, but optically not great from the fans. And I'm not sure if the front office really thinks about that, but I don't know if they also want to do that. Like this is the time to push the chips in and say, you know what, if it's between McCarthy and Moore, if we deem McCarthy as relatively safe, let's take the risk and go with Kellen.
Starter in college, guys. No, I like that after this year in Philly, because remember, wasn't he thought to be kind of a pass-happy little fancy lad? Maybe a bit too cute, a bit too much through the air, and then this year in Philly, he's completely remade that. And
you do got it. There is something to say about that, where not only has Kellen Moore shown big-time success at two different places, one being Dallas, one being Philly, but he has big-time success doing it very different ways. Way one was throwing the football at Dak Prescott. We know what Dallas was doing. Way two is Saquon Barkley running for 2,000 yards. Very different offenses. So Moore has shown that he can adapt to the roster that he has, and he can adapt and adjust, and that is impressive.
Granted, it's like, well, you Saquon Barkley, but it's kind of my point, is that he completely adjusted his style to maximize his personnel, and look at how well it has worked, right? And you could say, well, it's not as productive when Jalen Hurts' passing numbers have gone down, whatever. It's creating wins. They don't turn the ball over.
I mean, passing numbers don't equate to a good offense. Like that's a bad way to look at it.
They control the game. They play to their strengths.
Yeah, their offense
ultimately,
is
that's
incredible.
what you want in a good head coach. But so I like the versatility that he showed there. I think there's something to be said, Jake, for walking into a pretty toxic situation in Philly.
Very toxic. Think about the end of last year at Philly. Tampa Bay smokes them. Defense is terrible. Matt Patricia's the DC. Sirianni's on the hot seat. Like there was a lot going on there. Jalen Hurts was under fire, and now look at them. Like there is absolutely something to be said about rolling into that locker room and saying, "Okay, I got this. Let's rock and roll." And I wouldn't say the Saints are a toxic environment as far as like the roster and all that, but it is an unstable situation, and so he is proven that he also can do that. And it also says something when you can succeed in Dallas under Jerry Jones. Kellen Moore understands what it's like to operate in that building with, he was under Jason Garrett. Garrett got fired. So he has been through, that's a very toxic situation too. You got Jerry Jones as your owner, firing Jason Garrett as the head coach, bringing in McCarthy. So Moore has seen a lot of volatility in Dallas, with the Chargers and with Philadelphia.
And having success,
true.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, it still seems like every single week the personalities to manage are a lot there. especially when you probably got A.J. Brown unhappy with you every single week because he's not getting enough, there's not enough production through the air. So I like how he's done that. I think like anybody else, though, my questions with Moore are not X's and O's. It's will he be – how is he thought of as like a leader of men?
Right.
And this is kind of funny where does physical appearance kind of change how we judge? I have no idea what Kellen Moore is like in those situations, but he looks so cherubic and young and, clean shaven and everything. Like if he had like a beard and gray hair, would I be like, you know what, actually, I think he looks like a leader of men.
I mean, I agree with this. Like I think it's crazy when people are like, and I've heard this a lot and I've seen the comments where it's like, I just don't know if he's a leader of men. It's like, why? What do you mean? How would you know one way or the other? It's like, well, like T-Bob said, like he has a baby face. Okay. Well, that guy was 50-3 as the starting quarterback for Boise State. He was dragging that program to the highest of highs. So he did perfectly fine leading men in that locker room. Again, at one point, he was probably a top 5 player in college football. I mean, I'm pretty sure he was a finalist for the Heisman. So what, he doesn't have a beard? So he's not a leader of men? What, he's not 70? So he's not a leader of men? Pete Carroll. Does Pete Carroll look like some imposing figure? No. But is anybody going to say Pete Carroll is not a leader? No, he's literally written books on how to lead. Like, it has nothing. Bill Walsh was not doing Zercher squats and behind-the-back deadlifts, but he did what he had to do. Vince Lombardi could have been an accountant. Like, the physical, it is crazy to think that that translates at all whatsoever. Mike Singletary, one of the most imposing defensive players in NFL history, was the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers, and he couldn't lead nobody. Couldn't lead anything. Okay, so, yeah, I think that whole argument is crazy. Like, Sean Payton, does he look like an imposing figure? Does he look like a quote-unquote leader of men? Not any more than Kellen Moore does. So, if that's the argument, I would throw that out.
I'm not sure, but that seems to be the positives and kind of the question marks surrounding Kellen Moore right now. I got to give it to the Cannon though, because when we were watching games on NFL Network, thinking they were playoff games a few weeks back, he kept talking about how Moore was his favorite choice, and this was when Brady and Glenn and everybody else was still out there.
I think one of the things that when you look at his playing career and how he transitioned into the coaching realm, it was 1 year. So he was with the Cowboys for 3 seasons as a player. His last year was 17, and then in 18 he immediately gets the quarterback coaching job there for the Cowboys. I think that kind of tells you what he was thought of in that building.
True.
He wasn't an offensive consultant, an analyst. He didn't have to go to college and have a year of doing something there to prove yourself as far as a coach. No. Finishes in 17. He's a quarterback coach in 18.
That is crazy.
So I think that shows you kind of what a lot of people like around the game think of him, and also the fact that he could handle that. Because I'm sure that his peers were still there. I mean, think about it. Probably a lot of the same quarterback room. He's going.
I mean, that could definitely speak to how much of a leader of men he is, where he's a colleague, he's a teammate, and the very next year you're a coach. The very next year you're telling people what to do. You're not the boss, but you are. Now, all of a sudden, you're management, right?
From sitting there to now having the clicker and sitting in the back of the room and going over the tape. Now. And so that part, and I'm like you, I don't know inside and out Kellen Moore. I'd have to reach out to somebody that has played for him, either Dallas or I almost said San Diego, L.A., or Philadelphia. But I do think him going from player to coach in the next year kind of tells you at least X's and O's and maturity levels to be able to handle that.
So, Jake, you know how scuttlebutt tends to float on the wind here in Mobile. There's some positive Kafka buzz. And remember, this is something that we talked about, and he's going to be the coach of either, the American or the National here? One or the other.
Yeah.
But so I'm kind of excited to get an eye on him because we talked about it. We've talked about it. We talked about it yesterday. We talked about it kind of throughout this process of Kafka, where I get that he is from a resume, look at the stats of what the Giants said, everything else, right? He is a deeply unexciting candidate from that perspective.
So real quick on Mike Kafka. So Kafka played quarterback in Northwestern. He is the offensive coordinator under Brian Daboll with the Giants. They have flip-flop play calling duties literally on a week-by-week basis. Like at some points, Kafka's called plays. At some points, Daboll calls plays. Sometimes Kafka does it for a stretch of games. Sometimes Daboll does. The offense is Daboll's design. It's Daboll's playbook, but Kafka is running it, okay? Which is very different than Kellen Moore's playbook in Dallas when Mike McCarthy came in, okay? Kafka, at the end of the year, I don't think was calling plays. I think he had been, at that point, removed from play calling duties. Now, there are, as I talked about the partnerships, there's rumor that he would try and bring in Wink Martindale as his DC, which is kind of exciting. Kafka is a total unknown as far as like what he would do as an OC for long stretches of time. I like Daboll a lot, especially as an offensive guy, but some of the issues that arose in Buffalo when Daboll was there arose in New York, which is like the inability to run the football, not consistent with the running game. So that, like those issues that New York had, I don't know how much they were on the play caller, but I also don't know how much the successes can be given to the play caller. So like Kafka, like just looking at New York and be like, oh, they were 24th in points. Like that's kind of unfair because you don't know what's what as far as like his resume. So I would put him under the unknown. I would put him under a truly do not know. Like I watch every second of every game. It's impossible to have a real feel of Kafka as a play caller and an offensive mind. Him being in the head coach conversation, like again, you're talking about real-time questions. What's his offense look like? What is the offensive play calling capabilities? But now also you got to factor in how is he operationally? How is he, what's his infrastructure, his culture, identity, whatever. So he is the highest risk, highest volatility candidate for sure. Now, if he's knocking these interviews out of the park and he is just an absolute hidden gem, okay, whatever. But it's impossible for me to know that.
But like we mentioned yesterday, there is a disconnect between those numbers, which are obvious, and the fact that he's been a finalist for multiple jobs the last 2 years, right?
Yeah.
Like there's obviously, in NFL circles, there seems to be more respect for him than what his resume would dictate is how I would say it. And so anytime there's that disconnect,
I agree with that.
like we just talked about it doesn't matter where you play, they're going to find you. Like this feels like a guy that maybe the NFL's way higher on than the general public. I
agree. I think he's a guy, and I'm not saying that he should be the head coach, but I think he's a guy where he's well respected in the coaching circles, but the Giants suck. Like Brian Daboll is the same. Brian Daboll is considered, he's up there with the Sean McVays as far as like an offensive mind, but the Giants suck, right? So, and I think Kafka's kind of fallen into that where people think he's smart, people think he's good, but it's hard to heap a ton of praise on a guy whenever the Giants are as bad as they are.
Saying that if it did come down to that, anybody should be happy or you should cheer it on or say, oh, this is perfect, exactly what the Saints wanted the entire time. I just mean that I'm a bit I've been a little bit intrigued with him for that perspective, and some of his deep end after hearing some people talk very positively about him last night, just over some drinks at the Haberdasher.
And maybe so, but if I'm a Saints fan,
yeah, I'm not saying any. Again, I don't want to be.
I would also have
here.
questions about like him getting so many interviews, and everybody said, "Oh, it went really well."
Yeah,
but he didn't get a job.
Yeah, always the bridesmaid, never the bride type situation.
Yeah. I mean, again,
I'm sure you've had him. I've had him. Like I've gone places. Man, that was awesome. That was great. And you're like, I'm about to get hired, and then they're like, we'll be in touch.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, what did I not do? And it's kind of been multiple times for him. So like that would be a big question for me. And also, if he was truly the guy and you felt that good about him, why did you interview 3-4 people after the fact that, you had him in the bill? You know what I'm saying?
True.
Like that would be like, why are you flying to Philly if you feel like he was your guy? And Mickey Loomis would come up with something and
to be clear,
chew his gum and tell us why. But
yeah, I don't think. I mean, he's obviously not the Saints guy. If he was, you'd hire him.
That's what I'm saying.
Right? Yeah.
He's definitely not the first choice. Like Kellen Moore is the first choice, obviously. So they're doing everything they can to land Moore. If Moore withdraws or whatever, then it's going to come down to Kafka and McCarthy. And I'll say this about Kafka. That shows you how desperate the Saints are to get a young, offensive-minded guy. I mean, that is putting a lot of eggs in that basket to say, if it came down between McCarthy and Kafka, to go with Kafka over McCarthy, that takes some guts
for sure. Maybe you back into him again. I'm not saying that. I just think it's a bit. We'll probably never see. So there's no point in talking about it. Just a little. I thought it was something kind of interesting that dovetailed with some of the thoughts that were swirling in my head. So right now, flew out to Philly yesterday, met with Kellen Moore. Seems like things well. He's the odds-on favorite to be the Saints head coach. We'll see where it ends up going.
Wow.
All right, let's take a look at this Josina Anderson tweet. So this has been all over the place. A league source tells me some of the questions surrounding Mike McCarthy and the Saints head coach vacancy ever since he became a free agent have involved sentiments over the power structure and communication when it comes to football decisions, length of contract, etc. Similar to the situation in Dallas. Obviously, McCarthy is very tenured and accomplished. It's not hard to surmise where he'd likely expect due respect. Everything has its own weight and impact on talks, adding that note for context towards what eventually happens in New Orleans. Additionally, a lot of league perspectives have been given as to what owner Gail Benson should do when it comes to operations in her building in the future. I'll leave it at that for now. This right here, this might as well just be inaudible fart noises. Like, this doesn't mean anything. This is like ipsum plurum, like just like placeholder text. Doesn't mean anything at all. Like, these are just words strung together. I had to read this a million times. And again, former reporter, Pulitzer Prize winning newspaper. I know, how to read some copy. Okay. I don't know what the hell she's saying. I mean, I went paragraph by paragraph. I still don't know what the hell she's saying. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, it's saying that McCarthy is it's saying that McCarthy doesn't want to work with Loomis. It's like, is it? It's saying that Gale should fire Loomis. Does it? It's saying that the cap is bad. I don't know. Maybe. Like, this is just like, you can take whatever you want from this. If you go paragraph from paragraph, the way I would interpret it is, the first part is he doesn't want to deal with the power structure, all that stuff. He doesn't want to deal with what Jerry Jones was. So I think this to me is, he wants a separation between the owner / president / GM. He wants a separation between that and him to make decisions with the roster, whereas Jerry Jones controlled the entire thing. Okay. That's what I would say this paragraph is. This paragraph, I guess McCarthy's saying, I'm very tenured and accomplished, so I deserve respect to make football decisions. Okay, brother. I mean, egg in your shoe and beat it. Everything has its own weight and impact on talks. I would assume this means that him asking for roster control and all that is a negative in the Saints' eyes, which we know, like, that was the negative with Aaron Glenn, allegedly. Adding that note for context towards what eventually happens in New Orleans, I would assume this means he's not getting the job. Additionally, a lot of league perspectives have been given as to what owner Gail Benson should do when it comes to operations in her building in the future. This right here, I would say, why? Like, are a lot of league perspectives being given to the Cleveland Browns? Are a lot of league perspectives being given to the Tennessee Titans or the New York Giants? How about some league perspectives be given to the Giants on how not to pay Danny Dimes $100 million and let Saquon walk? Why should Gail Benson be the one sitting down listening to the tribal council with the NFL schmucks? Like, there's plenty of other teams who need the league perspectives. This is crazy. I don't know what this means. And if I was Gail Benson, I would leave every single one of them on red and I wouldn't answer a single phone call. Why do I care what whatever team is telling me what to do? Like, yeah, this seems crazy. Like, this seems if the Miami Dolphins are calling Gail Benson and saying, hey, I have some perspective on what you should do in your front office. Yeah, okay. Leave a voicemail. Who cares? So I mean, is this supposed to tell me that the entire league is calling Gale and saying, "Hey, might want to change your front office, Gale. Oh yeah, you might want to mind your own business." Like, I don't know. This is just nothing. I got nothing for this. I think it's one of those things where you throw it out there and you can interpret this 50 million different ways, and no matter what happens, you can come back to it and say you're right. If you're Josina Anderson, like if you come back to this and Mickey Loomis hires Mike McCarthy, you can come back to this and say, "Told you so." If he hires Kellen Moore, you can come back to this and say, "I told you so." So that's my take on that. I don't think it means much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you think. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video.